the first thing I remember is the sound. Not music, not laughter, not even the familiar, goofy jingle you're already hearing in your head when I say his name. It was something else. A buzzing under the skin, like static dragging nails across my nerves. The screen was black for a long moment, and then there he was. SpongeBob, except not the SpongeBob you know. He wasn't moving. He wasn't dancing or laughing or flipping Krabby Patties. He was just sitting in the middle of his pineapple living room, hunched forward, eyes wide, staring straight at the screen. Straight at me. His grin was gone. His face was stretched too long, like the animation cells had been pulled and warped until the edges tore. The colors bled, oversaturated yellows and reds, seeping out into the static that crept along the frame. And then the sound came back. Not the theme song, not even voices. It was laughter, but not the right kind. It wasn't the laugh of a sponge who lived under the sea. It was human. Dozens of voices, distorted and layered, laughing all at once. Too loud, too sharp, peaking like feedback from a broken speaker. The kind of laughter you only hear at a funeral when someone's finally lost their mind. I swear I heard my name in it. The camera pushed closer, a slow zoom that didn't stop. His pupils were shrinking, his eyes glassy, filmed over like they were filled with water. By the time his face filled the screen, the background had dissolved into raw static, and the laughter had twisted into something like screaming. And then cut. Silence. A black screen, save for a single frame of white text that flickered so fast I barely caught it. I'm not even sure I read it right. Just 4 words. You weren't supposed to. That was the first moment I realized the tape was never meant to be found. But before I tell you how I got it, before I tell you the things I saw that still keep me awake, you need to understand something. This isn't the whole truth. This is only what I can bring myself to share. And trust me, most of you will wish you never heard it. Before everything spiraled into nightmares and paranoia, I was just another collector. That's how I saw myself anyway, a nostalgia junkie. Some people spend their weekends bar hopping or hiking. I spent mine scrolling through late-night eBay auctions, chasing the smell of old cardboard sleeves and sun-bleached VHS covers. For me, it wasn't about the money. Though some of these tapes fetch hundreds, it was about the feeling. You remember, right? Sitting cross-legged in front of a chunky TV, holding a greasy remote that barely worked, the static hum of the VCR filling the silence before the tape clicked on. Those warped Nickelodeon bumpers, that grainy, orange glow. It wasn't just a cartoon, it was a portal. SpongeBob especially was my comfort blanket. I was 8 when the first season aired, and the sound of that bubbly theme song could drag me back into simpler times, when my biggest problem was whether Squidward would finally catch a break or if Patrick would eat all the ice cream. The show was harmless, silly, bright. It was never supposed to be anything else. That was the appeal. Nostalgia is safe, or at least that's what I told myself. Most nights I'd lurk in collector forums, trading scans of old promotional posters or debating whether certain edits ever aired. There's a whole subculture dedicated to this stuff, people obsessed with commercials, pilots, and lost media. 99% of it is innocent. Someone finds a Burger King promo tape or a station ID bumper, and the rest of us geek out. But every so often, whispers surface. Rumors of episodes pulled after one airing, segments that never made it to syndication, cassettes that were supposedly destroyed. The kind of stories you half laugh at but bookmark anyway, because even if they're fake, the what-if lingers. There was one thread I kept coming back to, buried deep in a forum most people wouldn't find unless they knew what to type. People argued about unaired SpongeBob pilots. Half the posts were trolls, Photoshop screenshots, creepypasta copy-paste jobs, but some comments had an edge of conviction. Mentions of scenes that disturbed test audiences. Animation too real for children. Episodes that never made it to air, and for good reason. I never took it too seriously. I wanted to. My brain wanted to keep it in the harmless myth category, but the way some of those old-timers typed, like they'd seen something they couldn't forget, made me wonder. And then came the post. It was simple. No flashy images, no clickbait title, just a user with a throwaway handle, Echo, who wrote, "I have a tape Nickelodeon buried. Don't ask how, don't ask why. You won't believe me anyway, but if anyone's willing to pay shipping, it's yours. One condition, don't share it past the halfway mark. You'll understand." At first I thought it was a joke. Everyone did. Replies were a mix of laughing emojis and fake bids, but there was something about the wording, something deliberate, restrained. Not the way trolls usually type when they're hungry for attention. The thread didn't blow up, it fizzled. Within an hour the post was gone, deleted, but I'd already taken a screenshot. I don't know why I did. Curiosity, maybe. Or maybe I already sensed that this was different. That night I stared at the image on my phone, the words burned into my mind. Nickelodeon buried. Don't share it past the halfway mark. And somewhere deep in my chest, beneath all the nostalgia and comfort, a knot of dread began to form. It started with a message in my inbox. I didn't recognize the username at first, just a string of numbers with no profile picture. At first glance it looked like spam, the kind you usually ignore, but the subject line made my stomach tighten. Nick buried tape. The body of the message was even stranger. "I see you on forums. You want Sponge. Rare pilot, not joke, no trace. You send $5 shipping only, don't copy, don't share, don't watch past halfway." Broken grammar, weird phrasing. No links, no emojis, no attachments, just words that read more like a warning than a pitch. I should have deleted it. Anyone with half a brain would have flagged it as a scam, but $5, that wasn't a scammer's number. That was gas money. That was a price set low enough to make me think they didn't care about the cash at all. They cared about me watching it. I typed back, "Do you have proof?" The reply came less than a minute later. "Proof is in tape, not online, too dangerous. You want it or no?" The speed unsettled me more than the words, like they'd been waiting for me. I sat there staring at the message, my mouse hovering over delete. $5 for shipping. That was nothing, but my pulse was hammering like I was about to do something illegal. I told myself it was just curiosity. At worst, I'd get a blank VHS or some bad bootleg. I could laugh about it later. At best, I'd own something rare, maybe even real lost media, something I could brag about in the forums. I typed again, fingers shaky. "Fine, where do I send it?" The address they sent back didn't look like a scammer's address. It wasn't a P.O. box or some offshore account. It was a small town in Ohio. A house, not a business. Ordinary, which in a way made it worse. I asked them one more time, partly to stall, partly because I needed to hear it again. "Why not past halfway?" This time the response took longer. When it finally came, it was shorter than ever. "Halfway is when he noticed you." I didn't respond. I couldn't. My chest felt tight, like the words had reached out through the screen and gripped me by the throat. Still, I sent the money. The confirmation email from the payment service sat in my inbox like a confession. The transaction felt heavier than it should have. Not $5, but something weightier, something I couldn't take back. Days passed. I tried to convince myself I'd been scammed. Nothing would arrive. That would be the end of it. But 3 days later, when I came home from work, there was a small, battered package waiting on my doorstep. No return address. The box was soft at the corners, as if it had been rained on or left somewhere damp. The tape inside was worse, an unmarked VHS with a faded white label, the kind you peel off an office supply sheet. Nothing written on it, not even a scribble. The case was cracked, one hinge broken, and there were faint, rusty stains along the edge of the plastic sleeve. I told myself it was just old. That's all. Old, second-hand junk. but when I held it, it felt wrong, too heavy somehow, as if it carried more than tape inside. I should have thrown it away right there, dropped it in the trash and walked inside. But instead I carried it to my desk, set it down, and just stared at it for a long time. That message repeated in my head over and over: don't watch past halfway. The thing is, when someone tells you not to do something, it only makes you want to do it more. And that's how a harmless hobby turned into a curse, sitting in my living room. I'll never forget the first time I pressed play. The VCR clicked, and for a second all I heard was the familiar hum of static filling the living room. Then the screen flickered, and I braced myself for whatever bootleg garbage I'd just wasted my money on. But what came next wasn't garbage, at least not at first. The theme song started and I almost laughed. There it was, the goofy nautical whistle, the bouncing melody, the pirate voice shouting, "Are you ready, kids?" Nostalgia hit me so hard it almost drowned the tension I'd been carrying. For a second I felt 8 years old again. Except something was off. It took me a moment to pinpoint it, but the pitch was wrong. Not drastically, just low enough that it scraped at the back of my mind, like hearing a loved one's voice slowed down on a recorder. The chorus felt sluggish, sticky, as if the sound were dragging itself uphill. The visuals were normal, bright yellows, ocean blues, the same title card you've seen 100 times. But when SpongeBob appeared, something in his face made me squint. His eyes stayed locked open a moment too long, unblinking, before snapping into the usual wide grin. I told myself it was just tape degradation. Old reels warped all the time. That's why collectors hunt for clean copies. I almost stopped noticing the oddities once the episode began. It was one I didn't recognize. SpongeBob walked into the Krusty Krab, waving at Squidward, who rolled his eyes the way he always did. Customers filled the background tables. All of it looked right, familiar, safe. But the longer I watched, the stranger it felt. For one thing, the laugh track didn't match. Someone in the background would slip on a pickle jar and the laughter would come too late, too loud, drowning out the dialogue. And it wasn't the bright canned chuckle I remembered. It was brittle, harsh. It sounded like adults, real adults, laughing in a way that wasn't amused so much as cruel. And then SpongeBob spoke. "Good morning, Squidward." The line was normal, but the voice cracked halfway through like the actor's throat had been stretched. The sound warped, echoing faintly. I leaned closer, thinking maybe my speakers were going bad, but then it happened again. "Another beautiful day under the sea." The words slurred at the end, dropping in tone, as if something else was speaking through him. Squidward's eyes flicked toward the camera, not long, just a second, like he knew. I felt a chill crawl up my arms. The scene dragged longer than it should have. SpongeBob standing at the counter, Squidward glaring, customers frozen in place. Seconds stretched into minutes. None of the background fish moved. They sat stiff, plastic, their eyes glazed. And then out of nowhere, that awful laughter again, too sharp, too loud, as if the show itself was laughing at me for still watching. I almost turned it off, but I didn't. I wish I had. The episode carried on, but it grew more broken with every minute. SpongeBob's movements became jerky, his limbs bending at wrong angles before snapping back into place. The colors started bleeding at the edges of the frame, and that laugh track, it wouldn't stop. It played at random intervals, sometimes over silence, sometimes over nothing at all. At one point, SpongeBob dropped a spatula and the camera zoomed in, not on the spatula but on his face. His smile twitched, cracked, and his teeth looked too sharp. I told myself it was just bad animation, but my gut knew better. I can't share everything I saw, I won't. Not all of it. But hear what stuck with me: Squidward walking off-screen and not coming back. Patrick motionless at a table, his head tilted just enough that his eye met mine. And SpongeBob frozen mid-laugh, his pupils narrowing into tiny black dots as the laughter turned metallic, shrieking like feedback. Then the screen went black. No sound, no credits, nothing. Just 20 long seconds of silence, the kind of silence where you swear you can hear your own heartbeat inside your skull. I thought the tape had ended. I actually reached for the remote, half relieved, half disappointed. But before I could touch it, the screen flickered back to life. And that's when it stopped being a cartoon. When the picture returned, it wasn't the same show anymore. The cheerful underwater town was gone. The colors had drained into dull shades of gray, as if someone had poured bleach over the cells. The sky was no longer that cartoony gradient of turquoise and bubblegum blue. It was cloudy, filmed over with static. The coral houses were collapsing, edges jagged, shadows stretching too far. And in the middle of it all, SpongeBob stood alone. He wasn't moving at first, just standing in front of his pineapple, arms at his sides. His eyes blinked too slowly, the lids dragging over his pupils as if he were struggling to remember how to be a cartoon. And then he looked at me. Not at the camera, not at Squidward or Patrick or whatever background gag should have been next, directly at me, as if he could see through the screen, his head tilted just slightly, curious. The static deepened like a low hum beneath my ribs, and I felt the air in my living room shift. "S still there?" The voice was SpongeBob, but it cracked in the middle, stuttered. I almost laughed, almost, but then the edges of the audio bled into something else. A whisper, higher-pitched, human, faintly panicked, like someone behind the mic was crying. The camera panned slowly, showing Bikini Bottom in ruins. Buildings slumped at odd angles. The ground was littered with what looked like kelp, but too dark, too stringy, and it swayed as if underwater, though everything else stood still. The sky flickered between static and photorealistic clouds, not painted, real, like they'd spliced in footage from a storm. Patrick appeared in the frame, but he wasn't smiling. His mouth sagged open, his eyes unfocused, his skin blotchy with gray patches. He mumbled something, low and guttural, syllables that weren't English. At first I thought it was garbled audio, then I realized it was another language. Harsh consonants, guttural vowels. SpongeBob turned to him, head twitching in jerks, and for a second his smile returned. But it didn't look right. His teeth weren't the goofy, blocky cartoon squares. They were long, sharp, yellowed. And then came the scream. It was SpongeBob's, it was Patrick's. It wasn't even in sync with the animation. It was human, raw, throat-shredding, the kind of sound someone makes when they're begging for help. It cut through the laugh track that had been droning in the background, silencing it instantly. The screen flickered to Squidward inside his house, except Squidward wasn't in character. His eyes darted around like a trapped animal, his mouth working soundlessly. His clarinet lay snapped on the floor, jagged like a broken bone. And then he looked at the camera, not an annoyed glance, a terrified stare. He mouthed something, 2 words. "Help me." I froze, my throat tightened. There was no way I'd seen that right. The scene cut back to SpongeBob, closer now. The background dissolved into static, then returned with photorealistic textures. Not cartoon coral, real rotting plants, dead fish drifting in the water. His face filled most of the frame, the edges bleeding, as though he were pressing against the glass of the screen itself. "You kept watching," he whispered. I swear I heard it. I know how insane that sounds, but the words were clear. The static rose into shrieks, dozens of voices tangled together, crying and laughing at once. The image fractured into a mosaic of SpongeBob's face, multiplied, each with different expressions, smiling, screaming, crying, staring blankly. They overlapped, twitching in and out like someone fast-forwarding and rewinding at the same time. And then there was a flash. Just one frame, so fast it barely registered, but enough that my stomach flipped and I had to look away. I'm not going to describe it, I won't. It wasn't cartoon. It wasn't animation. It was real, and it was wrong, and it still burned into my memory every time I closed my eyes. I knew then that this wasn't just a bad tape. It wasn't some parody or lost pilot. Someone had put things in this episode that were never supposed to be seen. I scrambled for the remote, heart-pounding, palms slick. My hands shook as I jabbed the stop button. The screen went black. The static cut out. Silence filled the room. I sat there, gasping, staring at my reflection in the blank screen. For a second I thought I was safe, that it was over. But my finger hovered over the eject button and didn't press it. Because the warning echoed in my head, "Don't watch past halfway." I hadn't even reached the halfway mark yet. Curiosity burned in my chest, tangled with dread. Part of me wanted to destroy the tape, snap it in half, throw it into the street. But another part whispered that I'd already seen enough to never be the same, and if I stopped now, I'd never know why. And so, against every instinct, I leaned forward, pressed play again, and let the tape drag me back under. I didn't sleep that night. Every time I shut my eyes, I saw fragments: SpongeBob's warped teeth, Squidward's silent plea, the static bursting into screams. And that flash, that single, impossible frame, I couldn't erase it. I couldn't even put words to it without my stomach twisting. So instead of trying to sleep, I opened my laptop. I told myself I'd find nothing, that the tape was some one-off bootleg, maybe a bizarre fan project spliced with real footage. But the more I searched, the more I realized I wasn't the first. It started with a keyword, lost SpongeBob episode, then buried pilot. At first I got the usual clickbait creepypasta, fake screenshots, photoshopped thumbnails. But buried deep in forum archives, pages most people wouldn't scroll through, there were threads with no images, no jokes, just text. Don't ask me how, but I saw it too. The colors weren't right. SpongeBob spoke my name. I didn't watch the rest. My uncle worked at Nick. He told me one of the animators had a breakdown. Something about inserting footage they weren't supposed to. He disappeared before they could fire him. Suicide footage rumored spliced into cells. Staff denied. Whole reel locked away in vault. Most posts were years old, abandoned without follow-up. The accounts were either deleted or inactive, but the tone, the fear, felt genuine. People weren't writing to entertain. They were warning. The phrase "erased episode" popped up more than once, always capitalized, as if it had become a proper name in certain circles, whispered but never explained. I found fragments of stories scattered across different boards. A kid who claimed his older brother had watched the episode and stopped leaving his room. A man who swore he bought a similar tape at a garage sale, only to find it blank the second time he tried. Someone else mentioned waking up to the sound of distorted laughter outside their house. And then I stumbled across a thread that stopped me cold. A user called Incanned Salt wrote, "There's a reason Nickelodeon denies it exists. It's not just an episode. The reel itself was wrong. My professor worked in animation. He said the overseas studio returned a shipment with complaints. They swore the footage wasn't theirs. Different frame rate. Different stock. Said the reel looked older than the show itself." No one replied. The thread died quietly like all the others. But I sat there staring at it, the words burning into me. Older than the show itself. I clicked through pages until my eyes blurred, but every lead ended the same way: deleted users, broken links, or cryptic warnings cut off mid-sentence. I began to feel like the more I searched, the less I was supposed to know. And then the paranoia set in. I thought I heard the faint buzz of static in the quiet of my apartment. I thought I caught movement in the reflection of my monitor. I muted my speakers, but the echo lingered in my head, like the tape had followed me offline. But the worst part, I wasn't just scared, I was hooked. The unanswered questions gnawed at me. Who was the animator? What was the erased episode really? What did those flashes mean? And above all, why the warning? Why halfway? That word repeated in my head like a curse. Halfway. I hadn't reached it yet. I'd stopped early, which meant the tape still had more to reveal. I closed my laptop with shaking hands. staring at the black screen as though it might light up on its own. There was only one way to find out. And even though my gut screamed not to, I already knew what I was going to do next. Second viewing, it spoke my name. I told myself I was going to study the tape objectively this time, not as a fan, not as a collector, as evidence. That lie didn't last 10 seconds. The second I pressed play, everything was worse. The VHS hissed, the sound of worn magnetic tape dragging against itself like it was rotting inside the machine. The Nickelodeon Splash logo appeared, but muted, warped, the slime-colored letters dripping too long like they were melting off the screen. And then SpongeBob. Except he was SpongeBob anymore. His body sagged like the corners of his sponge frame had softened, decayed. His bright yellow had faded to a sickly gray, spotted with dark pits that looked almost organic. Mold. Rot. The theme song limped along just a few notes off-key, with the chorus replaced by faint static, when the voices should have shouted SpongeBob SquarePants. It came out as one long, hollow moan, layered with what might have been crying. The episode began. But it wasn't the same as before. This time the backgrounds were stripped bare. The familiar, candy-colored underwater city was gone. SpongeBob's pineapple stood in an empty abyss, black water stretching endlessly in every direction. No bubbles, no fish, no life, just a silent void. SpongeBob moved stiffly, his arms jerking like stop motion instead of smooth animation. His face drooped, his smile twitching in and out of sync with his body. Every time he blinked, it was too slow, like the animators had forgotten how eyelids worked. And then the laugh track started. It wasn't laughter anymore. It was weeping, a canned studio audience sobbing in the background of every line. SpongeBob tried to speak, but his voice cracked, distorted, and each syllable stretched into the crying until I couldn't tell where one ended and the other began. Patrick appeared, but something was wrong with him too. His mouth opened and closed like a fish, words spilling out in a language I didn't recognize. Harsh consonants, guttural noises, almost like reversed audio. And his eyes, white, blank, no pupils. He walked off-screen without moving his legs, sliding into the void until he vanished. Squidward was next. He stood in his doorway, clarinet clutched in shaking hands. His face wasn't cartoonish anymore, it was human. Hyper-realistic eyes, bloodshot and rimmed with purple. He looked right at SpongeBob, then right through the screen. His mouth opened, but no words came, just a ragged breath. Then he slammed the door shut. SpongeBob froze. And that's when it happened. He turned. Not toward Squidward, not toward Patrick, toward me. The screen dimmed until his face was the only thing visible. His glassy eyes bored into mine. His lips parted, trembling like he was afraid to say it. And then, in a low, warbling voice, he spoke my name. My real name. Not viewer, not kid, not friend. My actual full name, perfectly pronounced. I jerked back from the screen so hard I nearly pulled the cord out of the wall. My pulse thundered. My stomach turned. I checked the room, every corner, every shadow, because it felt like he wasn't trapped in the TV anymore. It felt like he was here with me. The tape continued, but I could barely breathe. SpongeBob wandered through the empty void, each step echoing like he was walking in a cavern. The crying laugh track grew louder, sharper, until it wasn't a background sound at all. It was front and center, dozens, no, hundreds of voices breaking down in grief. And then the screen cut to black. No credits, no music. Just black. I reached for the eject button, desperate to be done, when a faint hum crawled out of the speakers. Static. The tape wasn't over. A new image flickered on, darker, grainier. A single frame at first, then another. I leaned closer without meaning to. The shapes were wrong, fragmented like a puzzle spilling out of the box, but then they began to align. It was Bikini Bottom, or what was left of it. Buildings collapsed, coral blackened, the ocean floor littered with debris. And there in the middle of it all, SpongeBob stood, taller, thinner, his body stretching, limbs elongating into something skeletal. He didn't blink. He didn't smile. He only pointed, straight out of the screen, straight at me. And then the tape screamed. Not audio distortion, not crying. A full human scream that rattled the walls of my apartment. I clamped my hands over my ears, but it drilled through my skull like nails. The screen filled with static. White noise swallowed the image, and the tape began to chew itself, the reels grinding in the VCR like it was trying to escape. I slammed the power button. Smoke hissed from the slot, acrid and metallic. The tape was burning itself alive. When I finally pulled it free, the plastic was hot in my hands, warped. The film inside melted. Unplayable, dead. I dropped it onto the carpet and backed away, chest heaving. My living room felt colder, the shadows longer. And yet, I couldn't shake the feeling that the tape hadn't really ended, that I hadn't seen everything it wanted me to. Because just before it died, in those last flickers of static, I swear I saw words forming, faint, hidden. Words I'll never forget. After the credits. Aftermath and haunting, the show doesn't end. For days after the tape melted in my VCR, I convinced myself it was over. The evidence had destroyed itself. The nightmare should have ended there. But it didn't. It followed me. The first sign was small, so small I almost dismissed it. I was scrolling through my phone late at night when I heard it, faint and tinny, bleeding through the speaker even though no video was playing. That laugh. SpongeBob's laugh, but slowed down, warped, each ah trailing into a rasp like someone drowning mid-giggle. I muted the phone. The sound kept going for 3 more seconds. Then it stopped. Later, I found myself doodling absent-mindedly during a work meeting. When I looked down, my hand had scrawled the same warped pineapple house over and over, the windows bent into shapes that looked like eyes. I don't remember drawing them, but my pen was still in my hand. The dreams came next. I'd wake up choking, lungs full of phantom seawater. In the dream, I was always sinking into black water that stretched forever. Just before I blacked out, I'd hear the theme song distorted into a funeral dirge, and I'd see his face staring down at me from the surface. Watching. Waiting. And it wasn't just me. One night I got a call from a friend. He laughed nervously, asked if I'd left a message on his voicemail. It was just giggling, he said. Like SpongeBob, but it didn't sound right. I hadn't called him. That's when I realized the infection wasn't staying contained. You don't just watch the tape. You carry it. It leaks into you, into everything you touch. Screens glitch a little longer, reflections linger a little too much, and sometimes, if you're unlucky, you hear voices where there shouldn't be any. I want to stop here. I want to shut this off, delete the files, and burn what's left of my notes. But if you're still listening, still watching, you need to understand. It's already too late. The very act of hearing this story means you've let it in. The tape doesn't need the reel anymore. It just needs a witness. One by one, we spread it through whispers, through warnings, through videos like this. I can already imagine you, sitting there with your headphones, glancing at the corners of your screen, wondering if you heard that faint crackle of static under my voice. Don't ignore it. Don't pretend it's not there. Because once you notice it, it notices you. That's the rule they don't tell you. The show doesn't end when the credits roll. It keeps going, bleeding past the screen, pulling more of us in. And you're part of it now. I haven't even shown you everything yet. I've held back, left out the worst of it, the proof I swore I'd never release. But maybe if I share it, you'll believe me. Maybe then you'll understand why I can't sleep with the lights off, why every time I hear a laugh track, my chest tightens like I'm about to drown. So here it is, the last thing I have, the part that still keeps me awake. The thing that makes me wonder if I'll ever escape. Revelation, why Nickelodeon buried it. I kept digging. I shouldn't have, but by then, sleep was impossible. I lived in browser tabs, archive mirrors, scraps of interviews that had no business surviving this long. Every click felt like wading deeper into something that wanted me to drown. And then I found it, the story Nickelodeon never wanted out. Buried in a 2003 trade newsletter was a passing reference to production delays during Season 1 of SpongeBob SquarePants. The article didn't go into detail, but a name was listed, one animator credited once, then never again. The trail was thin, but scattered across old message boards were fragments, claims that this animator had a breakdown, arguments with staff, footage tampered with. No one agreed on what exactly he'd done, but they all agreed on one thing: he vanished before anyone could fire him. And the rumors about what he left behind, those were worse than the tape itself. Some swore he spliced real footage into the reels. Not animation, not drawings, actual film. Scenes of empty hallways, morgues, flooded basements. One post, half deleted, claimed there was snuff buried frame by frame, quick enough to slip past censors but not the human subconscious. Others insisted it wasn't human at all, that he'd smuggled in reels from somewhere else, something older, shot on film stock that didn't match Nickelodeon's supply, a different frame rate, a different texture, like it didn't belong in this world. And then there were the occult theories, a ritual disguised as slapstick, symbols hidden in background paintings, a laugh track layered with voices speaking backward. They said the animator wasn't disgruntled at all, he was obsessed, convinced cartoons could be a vessel, that if enough kids watched, something on the other side could bleed through. I don't know which version is true, maybe all of them, maybe none. But the more I read, the more one thing became clear: Nickelodeon buried it. Not just the episode, but the whole story. Staff NDAs, quiet firings, entire forums scrubbed clean. If you ask about it today, you'll get polite denials and smiling PR statements. But if you dig deep enough, if you push past the static, the silence, you'll find the same phrase repeating over and over. The erased episode. It's not just a myth, it's not just some creepypasta meant to scare kids. I saw it, I touched it, and I'm not the only one. Which leaves me with one question I still can't answer. Did I find the tape? Or did the tape find me? Because when I look back, when I retrace every step, every forum thread, every DM, every coincidence, it feels less like I stumbled into it and more like it was waiting. Patient. Buried, yes, but never gone. And maybe that's why I can't stop telling this story. Maybe that's why you're hearing it now. Because the truth is, the episode was never really erased. It was only hiding. And now, because of me, it isn't anymore. Closing warning: don't go looking. This is the part where I'm supposed to tie it all together. To give you a neat ending, some final explanation that makes it all feel safe. Like the tape was just a hoax, a trick of old film and tired eyes. But that would be a lie. The truth is simpler and much worse. Don't go looking for it. I know some of you already want to. Curiosity's already gnawing at you. You're telling yourself you'd be fine, that you'd recognize the warning signs and shut it off before it got too far, that you're stronger than me. But I've read enough survivor posts to know how that ends. People vanish. Accounts get scrubbed. Names drop off the map. Sometimes they resurface months later, broken shells of themselves, muttering about static and shadows that follow them. Most don't resurface at all. And yet the searches keep climbing. The more it's denied, the more people dig. It spreads in whispers, in screenshots, in stories like mine. The tape doesn't need to exist physically anymore. The memory of it is enough. The seed is already planted. If your screen flickers tonight, if you hear that faint laugh bleeding through your speakers when nothing's playing, don't answer it. Don't acknowledge it. And if someone knocks, if the sound comes soft and slow, like they know you, like they're waiting for you to let them in, don't. Because once you do, the show doesn't stop. I've come to believe there isn't just one lost episode. Mine wasn't the first and it won't be the last. I've seen hints, references to other reels, other shows. Nick wasn't the only studio hit. Whole archives erased, whole pilots lost for reasons no one dares explain. How many more are out there, buried in dusty closets, traded in forums, waiting to be played? Maybe you've seen one. Maybe you thought it was just a dream. If you have, if you've ever stumbled across something you shouldn't have, if you've heard rumors about other erased cartoons, tell me. Write it down below. Maybe together we can piece it all together. Or maybe we'll just dig our graves faster. I don't know anymore. All I know is this. I gave in to curiosity and it hasn't let me go since. The tape's gone, but the static lingers. I hear it in the walls at night, in the hum of appliances, in the silence just before sleep. It's always there, waiting for me to notice. And when I finally do, when I look too long into the flicker, I know he'll be there. Smiling, watching, waiting. So don't go looking. Because if you find him, he'll find you too.